Before we get to the topic at hand, just a quick notice that I planned this video to be the first in a series of videos that I am dubbing tropes. It will examine topics commonly seen in various sci-fi settings. In addition to Starfighters, I plan on making videos exploring computer AI, universal translators and language, faster than light travel, and others. In each video, we will examine the topic from a real-world point of view to see if it holds up under closer examination, then explore its portrayal in various universes. Finally, we will briefly explore different ways that the trope at hand could be included in your own writing for the more adventurous of you. With that out of the way, today we will be looking at Starfighters, a common feature in the militaries of many science fiction factions. Now, if you don't feel like watching the video, let me just summarize by saying Starfighters make no sense from a real-world perspective, but are, at the same time, really cool and make for interesting storytelling when done right. So the answer is no, but yes. Now, before we really get into the nitty-gritty of the topic at hand, I just wanted to say that much of the inspiration for this video comes from the excellent Atomic Rockets website article on space fighters. Link in the description to the article. If you like maths and space cats, then I suggest you give it a read. If you're wondering what space cat, then give it a read as well, because it's quite enjoyable. Now, before we really get into things, we first need to understand the environment that any starfighter would potentially be working in: space. Many science fiction franchises portray their fighters as basically aircraft in space, often taking inspiration from Second World War propeller fighters like the Spitfire, Mustang, or Bf-109. But the interstellar vacuum is in no way analogous to the sky. The most obvious difference, aside from the lack of atmosphere, is that space has no up or down, and no horizon to hide behind. A vessel of any size will be clearly visible to its opponents, who will be able to see anything that ship does, unlike aircraft, which can hide their actions beyond the horizon and conceal their movements to an extent. The other thing to consider is that size matters in space. Smaller craft are unlikely to be any faster than larger ships, as there is not atmosphere to drag on a larger vessel and slow it down, and a larger ship will be able to carry more fuel, weapons, armor, sensors, and power generation than smaller vehicles, making it a more effective weapon. Now, before anyone says anything about how a smaller ship will be a more difficult target, or that small fighters will be more maneuverable and thus better able to avoid enemy defensive fire, I again remind you that space is not Earth. An enemy will be able to see you come at great distance, and thanks to lasers, missiles, and other weapons, engage you at a similarly long range, from a conventional standpoint anyway. With that fact in mind, a larger vessel will be better able to not only respond in kind to enemy fire, but also defend itself and survive enemy attacks. What about maneuverability, I hear you ask? Surely a smaller one- or two-man fighter would be better able to duck and dodge enemy missiles and lasers without issue, while more massive, cumbersome warships would struggle to do the same. But would they, though? Would a small fighter be any more agile than a larger ship? Probably, as it would almost certainly have less mass to haul around. But it would be sufficiently more maneuverable than a larger ship that it could outturn, outdive, and duck guided munitions? Absolutely not. Let me explain. Any computer-guided munitions will be better able to endure high G stress, pulling off turns and other maneuvers that manned ships just won't be able to match, because human beings are squishy things, while microchips are less so. The best defense against missiles will be to either scram their computers with electromagnetic interference, blind them with false signatures, or intercept them before they strike you with a mixture of lasers, counter missiles, or, as in The Expanse, small autocannons. Well, there are many counters to lasers, and I might make a video about them in the future, but for the moment, Just think laser defeatable, with the right tech and skill set. All of these methods take up space and add weight, increasing the size of ship which can carry them, and, if you want to have any additional weaponry with which to strike back at an enemy, that adds yet more weight. Bullets and missiles aren't light. So, in summary, if you are a future war planner thinking about how best to outfit your space navy, larger vessels are likely going to be the way to go. They will be longer ranged, carry more sensors, more weapons, and be more survivable, while also being no less slow than smaller ships, even if their acceleration and deceleration is a little more sluggish. That does not mean that all ships in your potential space navy would be as massive as possible, as you may want smaller ships to perform escort, courier, transport, and screening duties, or even mid-sized vessels to act as long-ranged cruisers. But the idea of a one-man fighter makes little sense, as it would be too short-ranged, carry a limited at-best armament, and be no faster than the larger ships it would be pitted against, and no less sneaky. Now that we have explored why starfighters don't really make sense from a practical standpoint, I bet you're probably wondering then why the trope is so prevalent in science fiction today, with numerous examples from multiple franchises coming to mind when you hear the word Starfighter. Well, it comes down to two things in my mind: Star Wars and the cool factor. As Star Wars by George Lucas showed us all the way back in 1977, Starfighters are cool as HE double hockey sticks, with the daring deeds of the pilots of these craft being infinitely more exciting than the story of some AI-guided missile would be, even if such a weapon is infinitely more practical. Star Wars was really the first mainstream science fiction property to include starfighters, with many prior works such as Star Trek, Lost in Space, and others focusing on more plot and cast-driven stories, devoid typically of big battle sequences. When making his movie, George Lucas took heavy inspiration from other Second World War movies, creating, in essence, a war epic in space. You may not know, but the Death Star trench run was heavily inspired from the movie The Dam Busters, which was based on the exploits of Second World War bombers attacking German positions. After the success of Star Wars, we saw a glut of movies and TV shows which intended to take some of its energy and money for themselves, often featuring their own starfighters, which themselves were inspired from Second World War dogfighting, with varying degrees of success, the most famous of these possibly being Battlestar Galactica with their Colonial Vipers. And because of just how cool they look, regardless of their practical lack of function, it is unlikely that we see starfighters go away anytime soon. Now let's look at some prominent examples of starfighters in different universes, seeing how they are used within the setting, and then I will give an opinion on how well I think they are blended within the universe. Now, obviously, we have to start with our look at starfighters with the iconic designs seen in the Star Wars movies, both the original trilogy of films, as well as subsequent appearances of the type in the prequels, video games, books, comics, and TV shows. Within Star Wars, fighters play a key role in most battles, providing both high-powered anti-ship killing capacity, scouting, escort, intelligence gathering, and transport duties. In essence, they perform a similar function to the fighters, interceptors, and fighter bombers used during the Second World War. Starfighters play such a key role in the story and hold such an iconic status that I just can't see the universe without them. Of all the designs seen in the universe, I think my favorite would be the A-Wing, but the X-Wing is likely the most iconic ship in the franchise. The Star Fury series of fighters, as seen in the Babylon 5 series, is to me the best way possible to include starfighters into your setting if you feel like you need to do so. These things follow more or less real-world physics, have multi-directional thrust capability, and serve primarily as screening and scouting units for larger Earth Force ships. And they just look so cool. I love them. Aside from Star Wars, I would argue that the Battlestar franchise has the most iconic starfighter designs out there, with many people I know assuming the Colonial Vipers are just a design from Star Wars due to the similarity of the two types, Viper and X-Wing. Speaking of which, the Viper itself is quite limited in range and armament, primarily serving as an interceptor to defend friendly ships and stations from enemy bombers and missiles. Other vehicles within the universe do serve as bombers, scouts, electronic warfare vessels, and numerous other roles. Real-world physics are followed to an extent, and really the battle sequences out of the 3 shows that I've mentioned are probably the best looking. It also occurs to me as I'm writing this that Katie Sackhoff has been in both Star Wars now and Battlestar Galactica. Hopefully in a B5 reboot we can get her doing that, so she has the holy trinity of awesome sci-fi fighter movies. There are so many other amazing universes which use starfighters, but to keep this video fairly short, I thought it prudent to cut off the examples at just 3. Rest assured, I know there are other starfighters out there, and that yes, they are pretty cool. Now I know that I said that starfighters do not make much sense when real-world physics comes into play. If I had to include them into a setting I was working on, and given my previously stated point about how cool they are would not take all that much effort, then I have a few ideas about ways I would include them into the world. Feel free to share your ideas if you think you have a better one, because I'm just spitballing here. For starters, I would keep my fighters grounded in real-world physics, no FTL, and they would be fairly large to carry sufficient armament to make them a threat to larger ships, and have enough fuel to permit more than very short-ranged missions. These craft would be used mainly as systems patrol and defense ships, serving as law enforcement and patrol vessels to free the larger ships for work with the battle fleet. Often, the vessels act around major planets, being well placed for defense against enemy forces making strikes at the planet they defend. The ships would have no real role within a major battle fleet, negating the need for large carriers, but they would be more than an irritant against even much larger warships, given the right circumstances. So that's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Do let me know what your favorite starfighter is from any universe, and also feel free to suggest topics for this trope series. And be sure to give that Atomic Rockets article a read-through. Unlike much of their stuff, it does not include much in the way of maths, and is more straight to the point. If you did enjoy this video, then please give it a like, and consider subscribing to the channel for more content like this in the future. You could even share the video if you feel like it, but no pressure on that front.